Alright guys, Chris with Dirt Road Life here, and I want to do a quick video on the pros, the cons, the good, the bad, the ugly, things to consider about having your outdoor wood boiler in a shop or a building like mine is. Let's get to it. So I think everybody's number one complaint about having anything wood burning in a building, in your house, whether it be a wood stove or in your garage, whether it be a wood stove or a wood boiler, is probably going to be the mess it makes. You're tracking in and out with wood, you got bark and dirt and stuff falling off of it. Not a huge deal in a shop, obviously a much bigger deal in a house when you've got a wood stove that's right maybe in your living room or something like that. It's very hard to keep the house clean. Here I don't really worry about it that much. You know, I sweep this area up every so often throughout the winter as needed, but the mess from the wood itself I don't really worry about. But you've also got smoke that wants to billow out of this door every time you go to load it. So I would say something that is an absolute necessity if you have an outdoor wood boiler in a building is a smoke capture fan like this one I built for above the door here. So all I do, I flip this switch on, it kicks on this inline fan. Then I can go ahead, I can open my door. And you can see that it does a pretty darn good job of capturing the vast majority of the smoke. Unless it's coming out of there really, really hot, sometimes you'll get some coming over the front of the hood there. But you can see I can load this without making a huge plume of toxic wood smoke in here. So I would say that's an absolute necessity. I didn't have that for the first year that I was using this boiler, and it kind of sucked. You know, one thing you have to consider is that this can be a fire hazard. I mean, God forbid this thing ever catches on fire and takes my barn out, whether my barn is insured, and so isn't everything in here individually that homeowners wouldn't cover. You know, you gotta take that into consideration. You also have to make sure that you can get insurance with one of these in the barn. Not everybody is going to insure a building with an outdoor wood boiler inside of it. So you really gotta make sure prior to putting and installing it that you can get insurance if that's something that you are trying to do. You know, if you've just got a small building where you've got your wood in it and you've got this in it just to keep it out of the weather, it's probably not a big deal. If you've got it in your building with all your toys and everything stored in it, like I do, you definitely want to consider that. Now this thing really doesn't get hot. The only thing that gets hot on it is this steel door that's directly adjacent to the firebox, but you can put your hands on these stainless steel sides. The thing is extremely well insulated. I could put this right up against my wall and it's never going to catch on fire unless you get an ember or something blowing out of here or kicked out of here that you don't see. It's something you want to be careful of. You want to give it probably as much space as you can. So that's something you really want to consider. You know, I probably should have mentioned it when I was talking about the messes you can make, but when I'm emptying this ash box, luckily I only have to do it probably once a month. Very big ash box on this boiler, but you get a puff of ash. I turn this on, this hood up here for the smoke exhaust, and that helps capture a lot of that. And I was thinking I could probably even put some sort of hood down here and blow that dust right out the side of the building. You can't put one of these in your building and expect your building to stay, you know, crystal clean like you would without having this in here. Now, granted, I do a ton of dirty processes in my shop anyway, from, you know, cutting wood all the time, making a ton of sawdust, to grinding, to welding and creating weld smoke. But if your garage is like, you know, super clean, or you're super anal, then you may not want one of these in your building. You know, one other con is that it takes up space. I mean, this boiler is not a small boiler. It's probably 5 foot wide and probably almost 6 foot deep. And then you got to have enough space around every side of it. Obviously more so around the front so you can actually load it, but you don't want it right up against a wall either. So I've probably got, I would say, if I gave this a 3 foot 36 inch clearance in front of the door here, you'd probably need about 10 foot by 10 foot square space, so almost 100 square feet. It's not insignificant, so just, you got to make sure not everybody's going to have the space for that. If you're working out of a, you know, large shed sized building, you might not want this in there taking up all that space. I'm fortunate here to have quite a big shop and plenty of room, but you know, not everybody has that much space, so that's a big consideration, I would say. You know, one other con is, you know, I got to bring my wood inside, and I guess I'm talking not from a mess standpoint at this anymore. I'm talking from just an efficiency standpoint. If I have my wood out here, you know, there's my wood shed. I could have my boiler right there next to my wood shed. I could walk 5 feet, grab, you know, a handful of wood, toss it in the boiler. As it is, I've got to walk maybe, you know, 25, 30 feet. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll bring a wheelbarrow full at a time and I'll stack this whole place up, especially when it's going to be snowy out. Just because I haven't had my wood shed built until a couple months ago. And so, you know, if I knew there was going to be a storm, I'd bring it inside. And I guess that's not necessarily a con to having the wood boiler inside, because you can bring it inside and then you're feeding it inside. But still, it's one extra, it's further that you got to go with the wood. You're not feeding it right next to your wood pile. You're bringing it, you know, 20 or so steps further. Now, some of you guys are probably wondering why I have a wood pile here all covered in snow and I have a wood shed over there with absolutely nothing in it. And that's because I just finished it about a month ago, and it's not even finished yet. It still has some finishing touches to put on it. So at this point, you know, it's almost February. I'm probably just realistically not going to get this wood thrown in there, because I don't want to move it into there just to move it back across the yard here and put it in my boiler. You know, maybe whatever I have left over this spring, I'll stack in there. I mean, I'm sure I will, but I'm probably just going to leave this here. We don't seem to get a whole lot of snow, so I'm not worried about it. You know, generally probably March we'll get some huge snowstorm and it'll make a mess and make this more work, but it is what it is at this point. I'm not going to move it just to move it again. So you know, that I got this from my buddy. He bought it at an auction for like 40 bucks or 50 bucks or something, he said. I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to stack some equipment and stuff that I want to get out of the garage in there, get out of cover, but then I can stack all my wood in there. I'm going to build some racks and stuff, and then I can actually move the racks from there over to here and have little roofs on the racks themselves, and then I can just pull off the rack and walk right in the door. So eventually this is going to be pretty efficient. Right now, you know, I'm just working on so many other projects that this is not very high on my priority list, but definitely having to move the wood a little further. All right, we've talked about the cons. Let's talk about the pros. In my personal opinion, experience, I think having your wood boiler inside saves you a lot of wood throughout the winter. I've always heard, you know, everybody says, oh, these conventional boilers, they burn so much wood. By conventional, I mean this doesn't have the EPA emissions controls. It's not a gasifier boiler. I think it burns so much less wood being indoors than it would outdoors, especially, you know, you got the wind blowing across, and, you know, these things are insulated good, but you cannot tell me that there's not a significant amount of heat loss by having this out in your yard with the wind blowing across at 50 miles an hour in the middle of winter, February day that's 0 degrees out. You just cannot convince me of that. I don't know that anybody even would try to say that. I'm sure most people would agree that it is more efficient having the boiler inside than it would be outside. So there's that. I would say though, any heat that does come off of this is heating my insulated space that the boiler is in. So it's really not a bad deal, you know, unless the heat's being lost up the stack, obviously, and then, you know, that goes for any boiler. You can't reclaim that. So obviously gasifiers are supposed to be a little bit more efficient, but any heat that's coming off the boiler itself is going to heat this insulated space. So, and I do have a video or two maybe on how I heat my garage. I'm actually going to do an in-depth detailed video of the unit heaters and the pump and all the components of this system, probably with a schematic and everything. But if you guys are interested, hit the subscribe button. That'll be maybe a little bit later this winter. You know, these things are upwards of like $15,000 if you were to buy a brand new one right now. And a lot of that's due to steel prices going through the roof and everything else just after COVID and all that. But I mean, that's a lot of money, and to have it sitting out getting, you know, rained and snowed and sleeted and hailed on all the time. I mean, you guys know what I'm talking about. It's just nice not to have that going on. Another really big plus is if something goes bad, like a pump goes bad or whatever, you're not sitting out in the elements. Especially, I mean, when this stuff goes bad, it's always on the nastiest, coldest day of the year. And to have it in here where you can pull a pump out, replace it, pull, you know, your induction fan or whatever out and replace a component in a heated garage or in a covered garage at the very least, that is huge. So that is one of the biggest, you know, pluses in my book. And, you know, stuff's going to go bad. These circulator pumps, they don't last forever. I think I've replaced 2 in the past, or in the 6 years since I've been here. So it happens. And then one other thing that I kind of thought of after I said that $15,000, I don't know if this thing ever fails, when it fails, I should say, these things don't last forever. They're like any other type of boiler. Eventually they rot out, and you're going to get leaking, and it's just going to not be worth it to repair. But if it goes bad and I don't choose to repair it, what I could do is I could pull this out. I could put a propane or whatever boiler, high efficiency propane boiler in the house, and I could backfeed from the basement out to here. I could tie these 2 lines in that go across the yard and tie into these 2 lines that heat my shop, and I could essentially heat my barn with a propane boiler in the basement 100 yards over across the way. It would basically just be backwards. I'd be heating, instead of heating my house from the barn, which I am right now, I would heat my barn from the house. So it'd be the whole, you know, just reverse. And to have that infrastructure already in place is a big plus. And along with that, when you're working on this, you're in a well-lit area. It's just nice. If I ever needed to make a weld on here, I've got a 220 outlet right there. I could roll my welder over. Hopefully that's years down the road, but you never know. This thing could start leaking tomorrow. You know, guys, I just thought of the biggest pro to having your wood boiler inside a barn like this, after I talked about having to replace this in the future. That would be, you can put whatever kind of boiler you want. Now, New York State, where I'm at, has essentially banned certain types of outdoor wood boilers for emissions reasons. They're not efficient enough, blah, 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 blah. When you put a boiler in your barn like this, nobody has any idea what boiler is in your barn. It could be some conventional boiler you bought off somebody in Pennsylvania that is completely illegal. Nobody knows. It could be a wood stove, it doesn't matter. All they see is a stack coming out of your roof with smoke coming out of it. You stick this thing in the middle of your yard, you got neighbors calling the cops. Oh, he just put an illegal boiler in his yard. It's blowing smoke down the road at her house. In here, nobody knows. So, you know, obviously, unless I replaced it and then make a bunch of YouTube videos about it, then I could get in trouble. But if you're just Joe Schmo that doesn't have a YouTube channel and you're putting something in your barn and you want to go with, you know, a non-EPA BS related boiler, you could do that if you stuck it in a building, because nobody has any idea what's in there. So that's maybe the biggest benefit I can think of to having a wood boiler, especially in 2024, inside your barn. I don't care what anybody says, a conventional boiler, yeah, maybe it's not as efficient as a gasifier boiler, but I can throw anything in this. I can throw green pine in here that I just cut down yesterday. I can throw, you know, wet red oak that's only, you know, cured for 4 or 5 months. I can, whatever, it doesn't matter, this thing will burn it. And with a gasifier, at least the people that I know that have had them, you have to split your wood super small, it's got to be super dry, and they're just very picky on what they burn. So, you know, yeah, okay, it's more efficient at burning it, but I'd rather have the efficiency in my actual physical wood cutting processes. And it would be a lot more time and effort if this were a gasifier boiler. So, you know, that's a whole nother video. I don't want to get into it. There's people on both sides of the fence that swear by either product. For me, the less emissions equipment, the less government control is always going to be better in my opinion. But, you know, we can argue about that till the cows come home. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button because there's going to be more like it, and I've always got good projects going on in the barn that's heated by this boiler that's in here. So thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you guys next time.